Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast, Season 5. This podcast is for and about people getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, Camino guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Hola from the Camino Francés, from the town of Zubiri to be specific. I'm here with my September Camino Experience group after crossing the Pyrenees. We took 2 days to go from Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port to Roncesvalles, and I am always glad that we do it that way. You may hear from people who have completed their pilgrimages, having reached Santiago, who say that the walk from Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port to Roncesvalles isn't that hard, and it's no problem to do it in 1 day. For some people, that's true, but I have a theory that most people simply forget how hard it was. This is Nancy, and I will tell you that my knees always hurt like mad after the final 5-kilometer descent into Roncesvalles, and usually all I want is bed. I'm recording this before leaving home, so I don't have to finish the editing while traveling. So I can't give you a live on-the-trail report of my group, but I bet they did great going over the mountain. Tomorrow we will reach Pamplona, and then my confident bunch of pilgrims will continue on to Santiago de Compostela without me. I will still be in Spain and on the Camino and available as a resource via email and WhatsApp. But now they have each other and their other pilgrim friends. They know how things work. They know how to find food and places to stay. And they know how the yellow arrows and the scallop shells differ in their navigational messages. This is the 15th group I've led from Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port to Pamplona since 2013. I have also walked the high road or Napoleon route 2 additional times on my own pilgrimages, and I've walked the low road through Valcarlos twice. You could say that I have a bit of a fondness for this part of the Camino Francés. I stopped counting my own pilgrimages in 2012, but I have counted how many times I've crossed the Pyrenees, because that's something I wouldn't normally think myself capable of. This is one of the ways the Camino has changed me or opened me up to bigger and more exciting possibilities. I now know that I can take on physical and mental challenges and succeed. And if I can do it, my friends, so can you. And so can and did my friend Chad from Boise, Idaho, who you met in seasons 2 and 3 and who you will be hearing from again today. We'll get to Chad in a moment, but first I want to let you know that my May 2025 Camino Experience group is almost full. So if you've been on the fence about joining that group, you may want to take the next step soon and let me know you're interested. You can do that by sending me an email or by going to my website, thecaminoexperience.com, and navigating to the page called Walk With Me. You'll find that on the homepage menu. There is also a link in the show notes to show you the way. Early registration for my September 2025 group will start on October 7th, but only for the people on the wait list. You can get on that list the same way you let me know you want to join the May group, through my website or by sending me an email to nancy@thecaminoexperience.com. Okay, now we get to Chad. Chad is, like me, what I call a serial pilgrim, meaning he has walked multiple pilgrimages over several years, and he plans to keep going back for more walks on the Camino de Santiago. He thinks of his journeys as chapters in a book, so this has the makings for a long book. Chad shares with us his motivations for walking the Camino again and again, which this time includes honoring the life of a special extended family member who passed away earlier this year. Chad also gives us his best tip for incorporating the Camino back into daily life, something he has gotten quite proficient at. because of my earlier conversations with Chad, I knew this one was going to be filled with meaning and significance. And we already heard the ending, which included the meetup with last week's guest, Nisi. So you know this one is going to be quite moving. So let's go ahead and say hello to Chad. Well, hello, Chad. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast with me again.
It's great to see you again, Nancy, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I so enjoyed our previous two conversations. And of course, our meetup in Spain. That's always a highlight for me when I meet my podcast listeners on the Camino, but more importantly, when I meet a friend. It
Yeah.
really makes a difference to me.
Yeah, I keep telling people that story as well.
Yes. So the reason I asked you back is because you have done a couple more pilgrimages since we heard from you the last time. So I'd like to ask if we could start by putting the pin in the map and share with us your most recent pilgrimages.
So this summer, I flew to Spain and, well, actually, I'm sorry, I flew to Portugal and I did 2 weeks walking up the Portuguese coastal. And, last time with my family, I had walked from Lisbon up the central. So I wanted to experience the coast this time.
And where did you start this one?
I started in Porto this time,
Okay.
and that was a fantastic journey. And then I arrived in Santiago and spent a day off there. And then I took the bus up to Oviedo, and my younger daughter, Bonnie, joined me, and we walked over the mountains on the Primitivo, taking 2 weeks to do that route. And so I did two paths this summer.
Wow. And quite different is what I'm guessing.
They were very, very different journeys, that is for sure.
Okay. So let's do this. We've got the pin in the map, but let's just talk sort of in general terms. How would you describe your walk on the Portuguese? And then we'll describe the walk on the Primitivo.
Yeah, the walk on the Portuguese was, for one thing, I absolutely love Portugal. I love the people. I love the pastries. I think I love everything about that country. So it was so wonderful being back. And the airlines that I flew on, they changed my flight. So I ended up actually, because I had pre-booked where I was going to be staying. So I ended up getting to Porto a day early, and which meant I had a day to just enjoy Porto.
What a luxury.
What a fabulous country and fabulous experience there. So walking along the coast was wonderful for me. There's something very healing, I think, about the water, and getting to start by walking up the Douro River and then turning right once you get to the ocean and just following the ocean all the way up, and those wonderful little seaside villages and towns, and then crossing the river into Spain and continuing the way up there. It was fantastic.
Well, we're all in. Let's go
Yeah,
do that. And Chad,
yeah.
we'd like you to be our guide. So when are you available?
That would be great. I would love to walk with some people that enjoy that as well.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That was solo, and that was a nice experience for me, just to have time to process and reflect back on what I had walked before and the things that I had learned, and had an opportunity to interact with other pilgrims, but also a lot of time for my own growth and process.
Now, I had the pleasure of following your journey because you were recording it. I believe it was it Find Penguins?
Yeah, I used the
Ah,
Find Penguins app this year.
that was fantastic. And not for nothing, but you are an exceptional photographer. So your photos drop you right in the middle of it and make you want to get on a plane.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
And the writing as well is quite, it's just
Thank you.
exceptional. Just this, you are quite a storyteller.
I appreciate that. It made me wish that I had done something similar for the first 2 years,
Mm.
using an app like that, because what that app, and there's another one called Polar Steps that allows you to do something similar. But once I got home, I got onto their app and pushed a couple of buttons, and about a week later, I had a hard copy book of of that journey, and that gives me something on the coffee table. So mine's a 12-inch by 12-inch. It's a book, and all of those photos are uncropped. I was able to choose that. The writing is in it. Anytime that I uploaded a video, a QR code is there, so people can still scan the book and go watch the video. It was fantastic.
Wow. So we're going to need to know where to buy that book because I think it would that'd be worth it for your photographs alone.
It was great. And, I work with patients and a lot of them are in memory care. And so I take these books with me to work and it's fantastic. Instead of just putting any old book in front of them with pictures, putting one that means something to me and that I can sit there and tell them stories. And some of the memory care patients, I can bring the same book in this next week and tell the same stories over and over again. So
Well, that's a great thing for a pilgrim because not many people want to hear our
it,
stories more than once.
it is great. Yeah. So I have found those books. So I did two. I did one for the first 2 weeks that I was solo, and I did a separate book for the journey that Bonnie and I took over the mountains.
Oh my gosh. So I guess I'm going to have to come visit you and your family to see those books. Is that what you're telling
Okay,
me?
that sounds good. That sounds good.
Now, I remember from reading your record, your journal on Fine Penguins, that this was a very significant journey for you on the Portuguese because you were honoring someone. Would you share that with us? Is that something you'd be willing to talk about?
Absolutely. A young man that had been part of our family's life for a long time had recently passed. His name is Alex, and Alex was my youngest son, Renton. It was his best friend. And they've been friends since they were in second grade together. And we only lived about, probably a half mile away from each other, our homes. So they were always at each other's homes growing up. And Alex found out he had cancer when he was 13 years old. And it was liver cancer. And so through the years, he's had a lot of different treatments and from chemo and radiation and surgeries. And he did everything he could to extend his life as long as he could. And he lived a very full life with the 23 years that he had. But like I said, he was not only my son's best friend, but he really became a member of our family. All three of my other kids had good relationships with Alex. Alex had a bed in our home. One thing I wrote about is that in the middle of the night, especially on the weekends, if we heard the back door open, we knew it wasn't one of our kids sneaking out. It was Alex quietly sneaking in.
The
And
best.
yeah, and so, but Alex passed earlier, just before my trip, and one of Alex's things that he loved to do was cook. He was a great chef and worked in local restaurants here. And his favorite movie was Ratatouille. And he was a lot like Remy in that he could taste a dish and he could tell what was in it, the spices and how to put it together. And so a lot of times he was in our kitchen experimenting with new dishes and new things that he wanted to try. And he was a great cook. He just wasn't good at cleaning up after himself, but we learned to put up with that. But he would absolutely destroy my kitchen using every pot and pan and gadget that was in there.
I wish
Um,
people could see your face because
yeah,
the love is all over your face that you have for this young man.
yeah. Alex, he was a treasure, and he's missed greatly. So when I knew I was going to be walking the Portuguese alone, I knew that there were a lot of great seafood restaurants and great food opportunities there on that section of the coast. And I decided that I was going to honor Alex by eating at places where I knew he would have liked to have eaten, and even ordering things that I knew that he would like to order and try. And so it was my way to honor him. And I had conversations with him along the way and ate at some fantastic restaurants that maybe pilgrims don't normally stay at. But it was a great way for me just to honor him and to have my own celebration of life with him in mind.
Wow. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I just can't imagine not having children. I can't imagine the pain of that. And to have you honor his life and your relationship with him in this way is just, I'm quite emotional at the moment. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I do remember when I read the Facebook post that I think it was probably shortly after he passed and you were honoring his life. And I had no idea how significant this young man was to you and your family. And I just tears all the way through. It was such a beautiful story. And to honor him. Wow.
Thank you. His memorial is actually coming up at the end of this month.
Mm.
And So my kids that don't live here are all flying back, and his birthday's the end of the month as well, and they're planning a birthday celebration for him too that my son is organizing. And we're just honoring his memory and his legacy and carrying it on with us.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that.
Oof. Yeah. These are the good, not the good stories, but these are the stories that connect us
Yeah,
and that remind us to go live our lives and be that great chef, be that great musician, be that great artist, be that great employee, whatever it is. Get the most out of it. Yeah.
that's right.
Oh, I appreciate
Can
that.
I share one quick story about where I ate that was kind of fun?
Oh, let's have it.
So I stayed in a city called Viana do Castelo,
Mm-hmm.
and there they had a hotel called the Fabrica do Chocolate.
Oh, I'm
And
in.
right. And what I had read about it was that it used to be a chocolate factory, and now it's a hotel that has a chocolate museum in the basement.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so all of the rooms are chocolate themed. And so the room that I stayed in had the movie Chocolat. That was the theme of it, posters and paintings on the wall and everything. And when I went in, there was chocolate on the pillow, and there was chocolate in the bathroom, and you were able to go and do the tour in the museum and buy more chocolate at the gift shop if you wanted. And then one of the big highlights was this breakfast the next day. And I don't normally on my pilgrimages stay for breakfast. I like walking early in the morning and seeing the sunrise, and I'll eat breakfast down the road several kilometers. But I wanted to stay for this famous breakfast. And they brought me out this huge basket of pastries and cut fruit and a bowl of molten chocolate to
Oh
dip the
my
fruit in,
gosh. To
and
dip the
your
fruit, are
own,
you
I
kidding me?
know, right? And your own pot of coffee. And I mean, there was meat and cheese and other breads, and there was enough for three people, and they knew I was I was there by myself. And about 5 minutes after working on this, the waiter came up and asked me if I'd like a menu. And I said, "A menu? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, in case you wanted an omelet or eggs or something else for your breakfast too." And I just laughed. And I ate as much of what I could of what they brought me originally. I didn't order anything else. But as I was walking that morning, I thought, Alex and Renton would have laughed. They would have said yes to the menu. They would have ordered more food, and they would have sat there for 3 or 4 hours
Oh,
just
yes.
enjoying this amazing breakfast.
Oh my
So that was unexpected, but gave me laughter for the rest of the trip.
Oh, it's so great. It's just so wonderful when you can imagine your people, your
Yeah.
family and the people you love so much with you on the trail and during these experiences. Ah, it's great. Now, we're going to need map coordinates and details for that location. So I'll put that in the show
That was
notes.
a special place to stay, that's for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, thanks for sharing that. So how was the arrival into Santiago this time coming up from Portugal?
It was really good. Let me add one thing about this trip too.
Okay.
So when you cross over from Portugal into Spain, you've got a couple options of crossing the river. I don't remember the name of the river.
I think it's the Minho. Is it the Minho
Okay,
River?
that
Yeah.
sounds right. So you can take a larger boat, kind of a ferry, a little bit more inland. But I took just this little boat across with just one other pilgrim, and you're unceremoniously dumped on the beach and pointed in a direction. And but the wonderful thing was it was in this wooded area that you've just crossed into Galicia. And as I started walking into these woods, it felt different.
Mm.
And it was like when I walked into Osabrero last year off the Francés. It just felt different. My spirit just woke up. And they had all of these Celtic symbols on these trees that
Uh-huh.
as you walked on the boardwalk, there were places that you had to walk and stand, and then the symbols would come together that were painted across these trees. And it was just magical. It was such a
Ooh.
creative wonderful thing to do. And so it was a great entrance into Spain. It was a great entrance into Galicia. And people that have the chance to walk this, I would highly recommend doing that.
I think the Portuguese is on my horizon. Seriously. Yeah, I am going to need to book you as my guide.
Okay. All right.
I'm so glad you shared that. That gives us a picture of the arrival into Spain. So let's jump ahead now. Can we jump ahead now to your arrival in Santiago?
Yeah, walking into Santiago is always something special. And it was again this time for me. I was actually surprised at how emotional I got. I didn't expect that. I had walked this, that last day. I think I had remembered it being more urban, and I was surprised at how much of that last day was still in the forest. And I just relished that day. It was wonderful and a beautiful day, and I had an emotional experience walking into Santiago again. There was very little of this path since I'd walked the central last time, and now I was doing the coastal that I saw again.
Hmm.
And it was nice getting to see new areas of Portugal and Spain. But then when you get into Santiago, there's some of the things that you've done and experienced before that were fantastic to experience again. But some of the newness of this journey, of this path, of this walk, and what it means to finish with these friends and with these new memories, all of it is wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah, that is so well put. So even if you're on the same route, it is a different arrival,
it really is. Yeah,
different
it certainly
experience.
is. Yeah. And being present with that, and not trying to bring too much of the last one into it, and just staying present with where you are.
I remember that as a theme of your Frances route walk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes,
that's continued.
it's great. So let's go ahead to Oviedo and talk about the Primitivo.
Well, that was kind of funny. So the original plan this year, I was going to do the Norte with my wife and daughter Bonnie. But my wife had had an injury. She had fallen while out jogging
Oh no.
and broke a bone in her shoulder. And
Ugh.
so she said, "This is not the year for me to," she's still recovering from that. She says, "This is not the year for me to be carrying my backpack, and I don't really want to send it ahead. So why don't you go ahead, save the Norte for me, but you go ahead and go this summer." And so I asked Bonnie if she wanted to go with me. And she said, "So where are you planning to go?" And I said, "Well, let's go 2 weeks up the Portuguese and then 2 weeks over the mountains." And Bonnie had been in the Navy for 6 years. And she says, "Dad, if you're talking about walking on the boardwalk and sand, I've already done that enough in my life. I'll join you in the mountain."
A girl who knows what she wants.
Totally. So that's what happened is Bonnie and I met up in Oviedo, and we spent those 2 weeks walking over the mountains, and we had a great experience together. I will say this: while on the Portuguese, and I'm meeting other pilgrims, and we're talking, and they're finding out that I've done a few walks before, and they want to know what I'm doing once I get there, and I'm telling them I'm going to meet up with my daughter and do the Primitivo. Well, some of them had done the Primitivo. I
Oh.
remember one German woman, especially, she said, "Oh, I did the Primitivo last year." She goes, "How many days do you have planned to do it?" And I said, "I planned," and I'm trying to remember. I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me. I said, "I think I planned 14 days." And she goes, "Oh my," she goes, "that's ambitious." She says, "I took 18 days to do it."
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking, "Oh, what have I done?" And, and
Whoopsie.
because she was a young pilgrim in good shape, and it took her 18 days, and here I planned 14. And then that night I pulled up my spreadsheet on my phone and realized that we actually had planned 12 days.
Go, Chad.
When Bonnie met up with me, I said, "Bonnie, I'm not sure what I've done, to us in the schedule of, but we've got 12 days to do this." And she goes, "Dad, all we have to do each day is walk. That's the only thing on our agenda is to walk. So we've got this. This isn't a problem."
There's some pilgrim wisdom.
Oh, I so appreciated her, mindset with that, and it helped me to relax and not worry about what we'd planned. And we just went for it.
How'd it go?
Well, it was wonderful. I mean, I did ask her as we were walking. I said, "Would you ever do this with any of your friends?" And she said, "No, because I'd still want to be friends with them at the end." And it's true, there is that part about walking the Camino and living life this way, that some people that would really challenge their relationships.
Mm.
It just made me so grateful, the relationship that I've got with my girls, that it's something that we can do together, and it just drew us even closer together this year. It was such a great experience to have with her.
Spectacular.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
So compare and contrast the two routes, if you would. I know they're nothing alike because we're up in the mountains on the Primitivo, on the coast with the Portuguese. But if someone was looking at the route side by side, wanting to choose which one to do, what would you describe? What would you share with them?
I certainly would think of, your conditioning.
Mhm.
That's one of the first things that comes to mind. Walking on the Portuguese, the coastal, was fairly easy. It's fairly flat. It's easy to walk on the boardwalk. I did lose 3 pole tips, that my poles would get stuck between the slats, and my, tips would come off, and I had to, restock on those. And sometimes the sand is covering the boardwalk, and that's what makes it hard to walk
Mhm.
but that's only a few sections, but that's a relatively, easier path to do. I say easier, you're still walking 12 to 20 miles a day, which is never easy. And,
Yeah.
but it was not too physically challenging. I'd say that on that one. The
Okay.
Primitivo, it was. There's a lot of elevation to go up and down on the Primitivo, and you really don't want to do that one unless you're in shape for it. We
Okay.
certainly met people that were not able to finish because they had not adequately prepared for the
Mhm.
elevation climb. And so that's just the encouragement that I'd have for anyone that wants to do that, is get on the stair stepper, go walk some hills, and hours of hills, because
Just go up
you'll
and
be
you'll be
challenged
fine.
with it. Yeah, yeah.
So the Primitivo meets up with the Frances at some point. When does that happen?
It does. It does down by Melita.
Melide. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where the route comes down into it, and then you've been walking for the last 10 to 12 days with a group of pilgrims over the mountains, and all of a sudden you've got that rush of pilgrims that have been coming across the Frances, and especially from Syria, that
Mhm.
that larger group. So we didn't have many student groups on the Primitivo, but you certainly saw them once you joined on the Frances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How was that? I mean, was it shocking? Was it exciting because now you've got this influx, or what was the experience like when you joined the Frances?
Well, Bonnie and I had already decided where we were going to stay, and we tried to avoid. I stayed in the more popular places to stay last year when I walked the Frances. So I didn't want to replicate that. I wanted to stay in some other places. And
Okay.
so we had places that were, kind of off those main routes. So we weren't having to fight the bigger crowds, in those towns and cities. But I don't know. I like the energy of everyone that's on the Camino. I certainly like the Primitivo, where there weren't as many people, and those that were there, it was nice to get to know them, and you're seeing the same people over and over. But having that build and that excitement build as you're getting closer to Santiago, to me, is kind of exciting. I enjoy that energy. And part of it for me is, what else would I want to be seeing these kids doing? I mean, they're
Mm,
out walking the Camino,
yeah.
and so I'm hoping this is something that is making an impact on their lives, and it's something that they're going to take home with them, and it's going to impact their world, which in turn is going to impact mine and ours. And so I really don't want to complain. You can complain about behaviors that you see, but complaining about people doing the Caminos, I don't think that's something that you're going to hear me do.
Great. Oh, I so appreciate that perspective. So Now you're walking into Santiago, you and Bonnie, totally different experience from walking in alone on the Portuguese. I'd love to hear about your arrival in Santiago on this time around.
Well, we were, I don't know that we really, we had a place to stay, but we really hadn't talked much about what we were going to do in Santiago. I have found my favorite cafe in Santiago, and I've got my favorite bar that serves these spicy mussels that I really like. And there was places I wanted to take Bonnie back to that we hadn't done 2 years ago when we were there together. But as we were walking on that last day, and we had a pretty good pace going on, we were just at the outskirts of Santiago, about at the airport, and I stopped to take Bonnie's picture at this statue, and a lady was just moving away from it. And as I took Bonnie's picture, she started talking to us, and she asked if we were the father-daughter that had been walking from Syria, and we said no, that we had just finished the Primitivo and had joined on the Francés just a day or two before. And she said, oh, she goes, have you walked, before together? And I said, well, I walked with my wife and my other daughter. The four of us did from Lisbon 2 summers ago. And she paused, and then she said, have you been on a podcast? Have you been on Nancy's podcast? And I sat there thinking, we've barely said anything. And this woman has, I don't know if it's my voice, or I'm sure there's other people that it's been four of them that have walked from Lisbon. I mean, there's 500,000 people that are doing the Caminos each year, right? But somehow
Right.
she has connected me with you and being on the podcast. And I said, yes, I have. And she goes, well, I have too. And since I listen to every episode of your podcast, I'm thinking, I'm trying to, okay, I've got to try to place who she is. And then I realize, and she's trying to keep up with us, and she's got a little bit of a limp. And it dawns on me that this is Nisi that you had just interviewed, that I'd listened to in, earlier this spring, and that she had MS, and that she had kind of a new breakthrough with a couple of medications she was taking that was going to allow her to come back and finish this dream she had of doing the Camino. And I was so inspired listening to her story on your podcast. I had remembered reaching out to you and sending you a message saying, does she have a schedule? I would love to run into her. I think maybe we would, be, like you and I had seen each other in Spain. I'm like, well, I would love to see her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your response was, she's starting way back in France. She's what, in Le Puy?
Le Puy, France. Yes. On a 3-month journey.
3-month journey, and she doesn't have it set. She doesn't know how her body's going to do. She's carrying her own medications in a thermos, and it's her. And I just am getting choked up. And I even pull up my WhatsApp on my phone to find that conversation between you and I, because I want to share it with her. We walked together for half an hour. Bonnie and I slowed down our pace so that we could walk at her pace. And we go to the first cafe we find, and we have a second breakfast. And we just sat there for an hour just talking about each other's journeys. And then I share with her this text that I sent you of wanting to meet her on the way.
What are the chances?
And here it had happened. She's crying, and Bonnie and I are crying. And I realized we couldn't have manufactured this.
No.
And especially with as many people that were on the path that morning and walking at different speeds, we're saying hello to people. We're saying Buen Camino and walking by them, or if they're at our pace, maybe we're having the conversation of where did you start and how many have you done, and the typical things like this. With her, if she had been walking, we would have just walked by her and said hello. So for everything to line up for us to actually connect, it was pretty miraculous.
Amazing.
So Bonnie and I, after connecting with her there at the cafe, she gave us her contact information and she added me to her WhatsApp group with her friends and family. And Bonnie and I continued on into Santiago and got to the square and took our pictures and went and had our spicy tiger mussels and found our hotel and dropped off our bags and did a little bit of shopping. And I'm just continuing to watch Nisi's journey in as she's posting where she's at and little videos back to her friends and family. And Bonnie and I decide to go meet her up at the top of the cathedral and surprise her on her way in. And so she was on her phone with her husband when we first saw her. And so we talked to him for a second. And then we told her we would like to video her walking into the cathedral and into the square. And so that's what we did. Bonnie got on one side and I got on the other, and we followed her down the steps and past the bagpiper and then into the square, and her finishing her journey and breaking out into a dance. And the whole thing was just miraculous, and nothing that Bonnie and I had planned for that day, but so meaningful. And then getting the chance to upload that video to her friends and family just seconds after it had happened, and allowing them to live in that moment with her. And it was just fantastic.
Extraordinary. And yeah, and you sent it to me, and I'm not kidding. I cried, laughed through the whole thing. I was the emotion to know just what that woman did to get to that point is so extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're interviewing her again, and that her journey, other people are going to get to hear, because it really is special.
Yeah. Yeah. So inspiring.
Very.
Oh, thanks for sharing all that. I just love this story.
Amazing highlight for us. What a way for us to finish.
Fantastic. All right. So I do have to ask the question. You are what I sometimes refer to as a serial pilgrim on the Camino de Santiago. But I'm curious, that's sort of a catchphrase or a label, but let's drop the labels. I'd love to hear why the pilgrimages on the Camino keep calling you back. What is the significance of this for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. I've read a lot of books. I've probably read over 50 people's books that have, walked the Camino, and I love all of them, and they all have, special things that they share about their journey. I don't think I could write a book about just one route or one summer and what I did. To me, they have felt more like chapters. And so I just don't feel like I'm done. I feel like what I gained that first year led me to come back in the next year to do the Francés on my own and do that solo trip and walk to Finisterre and to the edge of the world, and all that I processed on that solo journey. And I think that's what helped me prepare this year to do 2 weeks solo and then 2 weeks with my daughter. And I feel like I continue to grow, and I'm continuing to process, and I have things to work on then when I get home. With my family, with my personal growth, with my therapist, with my job. And it just gives me more reason to take that time out and to go put myself in the place to receive. And that's what the Camino is for me right now. And so that's why I keep putting myself in the place to learn and to grow.
Well, I have a feeling that you would do that anyway, with or without the Camino. But is there something specific about the Camino? Because there are other pilgrimages in the world, there are other spiritual destinations in the world. Is there something about the Camino itself?
I think the accessibility of it is absolutely amazing. I mean, what Spain has created across it to make this available for people to do, it's unlike anything that I think is here in the States. I mean, you can backpack long trails, you can do through hiking, but the planning and the walking of those things is different than what you can do on the Camino. But I also think, experiencing a new culture, new languages, different history. I certainly the history of Spain is, goes back so much further than what we get here in our country in the U.S. That's meaningful. Spiritually, it's got a spiritual significance. I love that Galicia is Celtic in its origins, and that means something to me.
Mm.
But I think the two things that probably are the most significant, one is the walking. I didn't realize how significant walking was as a spiritual discipline, even in that getting out and being mobile for several hours at a time, and what that does to you physically,
Mm.
and then how that opens up the rest of your body, your soul, your spirit as well. And the second part is being out in nature. I have absolutely fallen in love the last 3 summers with nature, and my relationship with paths are different, with the water is different, with the trees are different, with the birds in the morning, with the sunrise. It has been very special for me.
Ah.
And this year, something different that I did is I came home and set my alarm for a half hour earlier, and I'm getting up and I'm walking a mile in my local park as the sun comes up, without headphones, without listening to a podcast or anything else, just because I need that quiet time walking and being with the trees and on a dirt path and in nature and seeing the day start that way is pretty significant for me. And it's something that I hope I continue doing.
Hmm. Well, that was going to be one of my questions for you is
Mm,
how do you bring this home with you? Because if you take that much time out every year and you get into the rhythm of this and it
yeah,
becomes so significant, and then you've got that hard stop when you get home,
yeah.
you've partly answered the question of how you bring it home. Are there other ways that you bring it home?
Yeah, it's interesting. Those books that I was able to make off Fine Penguins, they're helping me because
Hmm.
it's easy to flip back to those pictures and those stories and get my spirit back to what I was living and experiencing in those moments. And I'm very visual that way and can recall those moments, and that's helping me keep it present. And the walking is as well, and finding community that it's okay to share with
Mm.
and process these things with, as well as having a plan for what I want to do next.
Mm.
And it's nice that next year we are planning to do the Norte together, and that if I'm feeling stuck, I can go pull up that spreadsheet, or I can pull up that guidebook, and I can pull up the map, and I can start looking at what I want to do next year.
It's a typical thing that we do, right? From our home life, we plan vacations, we plan
Mhm.
getaways, we plan things to anticipate. And oftentimes those things are to escape an
Mm.
undesired home situation or work or a job that you don't love. But it sounds like from what you're describing, it's not actually that because home is pretty satisfying, but it's more, this is so integral to your spiritual practice.
Yeah, this is a yeah, you're right. I think a lot of vacations can be about escaping,
Hmm.
but I can't imagine myself planning an escape trip right now. I really, the plans that I've got for the next 10 years have to do with finding caminos around the world
Ah.
and walking them. There's a few more in Spain that I'm like, okay, I've got to do these first. Jamie and I went for a walk Sunday together, and that's what we were talking about. The next couple of years are definitely going to have us back in Spain. And after that, maybe we open up the map, and because there's others that we've heard about that we want to do as well. But I think our vacationing is going to look different based on what we've experienced on the Camino.
Mm. Fantastic. Now, when you get to the Camino, how long does it take you to get into it? Do you know what I mean? So you've come
Mm.
from a busy life and all the shuffle of travel. You land in Europe, you get to your starting point, and you start walking. Is it an instant, I'm there, or does it take you a little bit of time to get into the rhythm of it?
Yeah, another good question. You had suggested to me last year starting slow,
Hmm.
and it meant that I planned an extra day in Saint Jean Pied de Port. And at first, when I got there, I was like, "No, I'm ready and raring to go." And the people that I met that night, they were leaving the next morning, and I felt like I was missing out somehow.
Yeah.
But then I spent that day in that village, and that day was very meaningful and significant to me. And I did things that I wouldn't have got to have done, spending time in the church there, eating at the little French restaurant for lunch, walking around the citadel, experiencing a day in a French village, and then I met more pilgrims,
Yeah.
and so that starting small last year was a really good thing. This year, I planned, just because I wanted to make the most of my days, and I'd been to Porto before. I thought, well, I'll get to Porto and I'll start the next day.
No, you won't.
And then it was because of the airlines that I ended up spending an extra day in Porto. But that helped me recover from the long airline travel. And it helped me, just start breathing and start being present with where I was at. And so I was glad I had another slow start.
Great.
I'm active in the Boise chapter of the, American Pilgrims on the Camino. And last month I was out on a walk with some of them and walked with a gentleman named Ray who had done the Norte. And we were talking about where he started and, where you go the first day. And I had a friend who just did that route this summer, and that first day can be pretty difficult. I think it's similar to that first day in the Francés.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggested a place where you could break up that day and stay about halfway.
Perfect.
And I thought, you know what, that slow start, there's a high elevation. We're not going to be in a rush. We don't want to be in a rush. I want to take it all in. We're going to be in that vast country. So having that tip from that pilgrim,
Right.
we've planned a day of, okay, we're going to make that first day shorter. And we're going to start out slow and just kind of ease our way into it as much as you can when there's as much elevation as there is on the Norte.
Right.
But we're not in a rush.
Great. That's a great spiritual practice right there, isn't it?
It's true.
Yeah. Ah, wonderful. So we've covered quite a lot of ground in a short period of time, and I just love your take on pilgrimage and on spirituality on the trail. Is there anything that you would like to share? Something that was just such a quintessential experience of pilgrimage for you, or that you'd like to share?
Last year as I walked the Francés, having all of that time alone for about 5 weeks, and it's not that I didn't walk with some people sometimes, and I certainly made friends and I built community, and I'm in contact with some of those people, to this day. But it gave me a lot of time to walk and process myself. And something interesting that I did, and I really didn't think about it. I think maybe another pilgrim had told me that he had done this, but every morning I'd taken a picture of my shadow when the sun came out. I could put it together of all of those days of my shadow, and some of them are longer and some of them are short shadows when the sun didn't come out because of the clouds until later in the day. But I realized what I was processing was a lot about my shadow self and about parts of myself that didn't make me comfortable necessarily. And I struggled on the Francés, wrestling with myself. And what I realized is I am not very compassionate with myself. I've got a job where compassion is very important for other people. I know how to be present with them. And what last year's pilgrimage let me realize is I'm not very gentle with myself. And so it really gave me something to work on this year, with my therapist, with my family, with myself, making decisions of what am I going to do with this. And this year I had a much different approach. And what I found is that when the sun came out and I saw my shadow, I was greeting it. And I was saying, hello, shadow. And I see you today. And I know you're with me today. And my therapist helped me realize that where there's sun, where there's light, there's going to be shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And that shadow is on the ground, and it means it's helping me keep grounded.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And so I'm not afraid of that shadow part anymore. And I'm trying to be more wholly integrated. And I got to live that out on this walk more this time. I certainly process differently on solo walks. I carry a
Mhm.
little recorder with me that's, I keep in my up by my shoulder that I can flip it on and talk as I walk. And I used it a lot on those first 2 weeks on the Portuguese. I never turned it on when I was walking with Bonnie because we were walking next to each other and I would process with her. And
Uh-huh.
again, having someone that I could be real with that knew me is such a gift.
Yes.
And, and I think Bonnie and I are wired very similarly. So it allowed us to do a lot of processing and growing together. And so that's why I said these feel like chapters. I keep learning more things about myself and keep growing. And I think that's what I found this year is that I can be present with my shadow and that I can be centered and I can be grounded and I don't have to try to run from that.
Oh, wow. What a journey that must have been and still is, I
It
imagine.
still is. That's right.
Yes. Yes. And you know what you remind me of is that it is so easy on the Camino to not look at those things because there are so many people that you could just talk to and get to know and hear their stories and drink wine, drink
Right.
beer, eat, talk, and
Yeah.
never touch into these things. So would you say that it was walking a stage alone that had you get into that?
And certainly last year's helped me realize it
Mhm.
when I was alone and I realized I avoid having to go there.
Mm.
And yeah, and I certainly see that in others, but it's easier to see it in others than it is in yourself
Oh,
of
yes.
what do you do to avoid, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so, and I made some tough choices this year. This year at Thanksgiving, I decided I was going to be done with alcohol.
Wow.
And so this was the first Camino that I wasn't at the end of the day having part of that bottle of wine that they set on the table or, that beer at the end of the stage. And just because I realized I was using it for avoidance.
Mm.
And that wasn't to say what anybody else was doing.
Sure.
It was my journey. And I wondered going into it how easy it would be to do a sober Camino because, alcohol is available and can be part of the culture. And I found it to be very, very easy to do.
I found the same thing actually this
Did
last
you?
time. Yes, I discovered affordable drinking in Spain,
Mm,
which isn't such a great thing for someone who really enjoys, I never drink a lot or I don't drink to excess, but a daily glass of brandy
mm,
for €3 is affordable.
right.
And yeah, and so this past Camino in May, I didn't have brandy once. I had wine a couple times and I didn't miss it at all.
Yeah.
And what I was longing for was the ritual of sitting down with something at the end of the day and being able to legitimately sit somewhere for an hour rather than
Yes.
just be loitering, you
Yes.
know? And so I discovered Aquarius for the first time. How did I not discover Aquarius before this year? What did you end up with some kind of a drink that would have you sitting somewhere?
The great thing about Spain and Portugal is they've got great non-alcoholic beers. And
Yeah.
you were the one who taught me how to order them. And I'm very good at doing that. But I will certainly say this last year when I decided to not drink, I did it at the beginning, felt that, but this is a routine. This is
Yeah.
something that you've created to unwind, and you've got to replace it with something.
Ah,
So whether that's journaling or conversation or processing, what are you going to do, to recover this time or this habit? What are you going to replace it with that is something that you want to move forward with?
I love that level of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're my role model for that, Chad.
I'm just a pilgrim on his journey.
Aren't we all?
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, how about we wrap up with your message to first-time pilgrims, people who are thinking about walking the Camino or are getting ready to go on their first pilgrimage. What would you say to them?
Just as much as possible, be present. And it's great to have things to look forward to. You certainly need those in your life. And when you're done, you certainly need good ways to be able to look back on them. But I would just encourage people in their journey just to stay as present as possible. And because that is part of the journey. Once you've decided you've heard about the Camino and there's this inkling in your heart, your journey's begun.
So
And
true.
I just encourage people just to be present with that and to see what it stirs up in them. And, maybe write those things down. Start journaling now about your questions, not just about what do I pack and how far do I go and what shoes do I wear, but start processing those things about why you would be doing this and what you think you could get out of it and your responses to it. And then when you hit roadblocks, asking yourself the questions, okay, what am I feeling now and why? And maybe you're able to process that yourself or find someone safe to process that with. And if you get a block, even like Nisi did for years, she didn't get to go do this. And yet that didn't mean that dream died and she found a way to finally go. And I had a friend the other day say, I don't know that I've got, well, she basically said, will you help me set this up for something that I can do and with the goals that I have? And that is doable. So I just encourage people, get out there, get on your walking shoes and go do it.
And that's such a great point. You can put together the pilgrimage that suits you.
Yes.
You don't have to pick up the guidebook and follow it or an app and follow it. That's why I love talking with pilgrims before they go and talking through, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want from this experience? What do you want the experience to be? And what do you want to take home from it? Yeah. So important, these questions.
And those things will help guide you when you're on your way and help you make the decisions of what you're going to do along the path. Yes. Because of what it is that you want to get out of.
Yes. And when it gets hard and you want to quit or you want to go to the beach in Ibiza or Tenerife, wherever you want to go in Canary Islands, whatever, that why will keep you on the path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chad, thank you so much. It's always so good to chat with you.
Thanks for having me back, Nancy. And thanks for what you're creating here. And thanks for connecting me with Nisi too. That was some amazing Camino magic. If I saw it in a movie, I wouldn't believe it. And I got to live it.
All right. Well, let's see what more Camino magic we can get. And I'll have you back next time after you walk the Norte. All right, Chad. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nancy. Bye-bye.